My name is Abby Harwell. I am the Director of Communications with United Way of the Piedmont. We serve Cherokee, Spartanburg, and Union counties. I'm very excited to introduce today's speaker. First, I do want to plug some upcoming Together SC events. There are lots of general events on the calendar, but from a marketing standpoint, we have a storytelling workshop coming up on November 13th. I'm very excited about that. It's going to be, I think, more like a half day in-person model in Columbia. Have several speakers, a panel, some interactive elements. There'll be lunch. So I know that link will be going out if you're not already registered, but would love to see y'all there. It's going to be a great event, and just really, I think, actionable things to take home with you from that one. And without further ado, I'm going to introduce today's speaker, who is Dan Stanton. He's the CEO with Beam and Hinge. He took over as CEO. Sorry, I'm getting a call of Beam and Hinge in January of 2020 after retiring from the Army as a lieutenant colonel. He has extensive experience in strategic planning, operations, logistics, and integrating organizational change. He's led organizations from 30 to over 250 people, functioned as a CEO for organizations of up to 450 people, and mentored Iraqi National Police as part of a specialized 11-person advisory team. So he's got quite the experience. He has an MBA from USC's Moore Business School and a BS from Clemson in industrial engineering, and also attended UNC's Ken Flager Business School, Executive Leadership Training, and Army's Command and General Staff College. So thank you, Dan, for being with us here this morning and for telling us about the nonprofit website Lifecycle. So take it away.
Thanks very much. I appreciate it, Abby and Brooke, Ben. Thank y'all for having Lee and I this morning. I don't have a lot else. You kind of read most of my resume. But the one thing I'll just make note of is when during my 21 years in the Army, when I wasn't in the Middle East, I was pretty much in the Southeast. I was stationed in Georgia, South Carolina, and North Carolina throughout. Long history. My family and I were stationed in Sumter for about 5 years. And we knew when we were done with the Army, this was the part of the country we wanted to be in. I took over Beam and Hinge in January/February of 2020. My retirement ceremony was the last week of February of 2020. So I had 3 weeks of the what I'll call the good times, the normal times. Then the world shut down and everybody put their iMacs under their arm and went home, and we figured out how to build websites from our house in our pajamas. So that was the start of my going on 5 years of Beam and Hinge. It's been awesome. We've been around since 2012. Lee's going to tell you a little bit more about that. Before I turn it over to Lee to introduce himself and take us through our first few slides, I just want to kind of put one caveat out that I like with this sort of thing. When we do these kinds of presentations, the spectrum of knowledge about this topic varies widely. So some folks might be like, oh gosh, I get all that. And some folks might be like, you're speaking over my head. I don't know where you are. If anybody wants to talk after or schedule something next week or whatever, that's fine. What we tried to do when we put this together is aim at the fat part of the bell curve and just try to meet people as best we can where they are. So that's going in. That's what we're aiming to do. I'll talk more in a bit, but I'm going to turn it over to Lee, who is one of our amazing team members with a deep knowledge in the nonprofit space, to introduce himself and get us going.
Sure. Thank you, Dan. I'm going to take a minute and share my screen here. Great. Can everyone see that okay? Just showing up. Good.
Yes.
Great. So as Dan said, I'm Lee Goebel. I'm the business development manager for Beam and Hinge. And prior to joining Beam and Hinge at the beginning of last year, I spent about 4.5 years at Central Carolina Community Foundation. So Community Foundation for 11 counties in the Midlands in the marketing and communications department there. Um, joined Beam and Hinge really as a website contenter. So developing content for our clients' websites, building out the blueprints for the wireframes for websites that were being built, and advising on SEO, search engine optimization, going through websites and making recommendations for what they can do to increase their SEO scores. And over the last 7 to 8 months, have kind of transitioned more into a business development role, which has been really helpful. So I got to see kind of how the sausage was made and understand our process really. And now I get to do fun things like this, where we help educate folks on websites and today on the life cycle of a website and how to evaluate that. So Beam and Hinge was founded in 2014. We are in our 10th year now of helping to elevate organizations by delivering exceptional results-oriented websites. Located here in Columbia, South Carolina, and we really serve right at the medium complexity, mid-size perhaps organizations and companies. We manage just over 100 websites, and we're really proud to say that 43 of those are nonprofit websites. So we are very comfortable on this call today and speaking with you all, and really have the honor of working with so many fantastic nonprofits in South Carolina. You may see your logo up on the screen, and if you don't, I'm sure you recognize some of the logos that are on the screen. This is just a very small sample size of all the organizations we have the honor of working with. Our goal for today is not to sell you a website. Our goal for today is for you to walk away from this call feeling a lot more confident in figuring out, number one, when is it time for you to have a new website? And number two, how to move forward with that process. So we're going to start today by really talking about optimizing the impact of your current website and maybe what you should be getting out of it. We'll then move to understanding the aging process of a site. So there are some things that you have control over in the website aging, and there are some things that you do not have control over. And we're going to get into both of those later on. And then we'll talk about what your expectations for a new website project should be, and especially when you're looking for a partner. Of course, it goes without saying that we would love to have everyone on this call as a client, but again, that's not our goal for today. We're not here to convince you that we are the best partner, even though we think we probably are. We just want you to feel more knowledgeable and more confident when it comes time to go through this process that you'll likely only go through once every handful of years. So let's start with asking ourselves this very first question of, are you getting the most out of your website? We want you to think about your website. It has a lot of functions and a lot of features, probably has a lot of information on it. All of that information is there for a reason, but at the end of the day, your website exists to build your coalition. It exists to bring folks in as volunteers. It exists to help further maybe your advocacy projects. It exists to help clients get services from your organization. And it also is there to help bring in those who would financially support your organization and support your mission. How does it do that? How does it build that coalition? Well, number one, it tells the story. Your website should be telling your story, and it sounds like in November you're going to have a storytelling class, so that'll be great with Together SC. And as you go through that and you look at your website, think about how your website tells your story. Is it clear and is it compelling? One of the easiest ways to do that is to find someone who doesn't know much about your organization. So it's easy for us to tell the story of our organization and of our company. That's why we should not look at the website to see if it's really telling the story. Go find your cousin, somebody you go to church with, maybe it's your neighbor, and say, hey, will you spend 5 minutes on my site? which is about double the amount of time the average user is going to spend on your site. Spend 5 minutes on my site, and will you come back and tell me what's important to my organization and what we do? And if they can't do that, maybe your website's not telling your story in the best way and in a compelling way. If they do, then that's great. Um, your site should also establish trust. So when a user comes to your site, whether they want to volunteer or receive a service from you, maybe they want to donate to you, are the functions of your site or the features on your site working to establish trust or not? For example, if a donor comes to your site and it seems kind of rickety, it's taking a lot of time for the pages to load, that they're getting a couple of error messages, that's probably not establishing trust, and it may block them from donating or supporting your cause. When we think about a site that is really easy to navigate and doesn't lead to a lot of dead ends, doesn't and does exactly what it's supposed to do functionally, that is a site that establishes trust. Your site should also facilitate participation in your mission. For example, say you are a nonprofit that serves primarily the senior citizen community. Are they able to go on your site and easily find the services that they're offered? Another great way to make sure that they can do that is to find someone who may be in that age group that should be accessing your services. Ask them to go on your site. Ask them if they can find the services that you're offering them really easily. You do not want to get your 15-year-old niece or nephew, because they'll be able to find it a lot easier than someone who may be, 70 plus. Uh, so again, it's getting those folks that are not as familiar with your organization to be able to go on there and find the services they need in an easy way. Another area that you can make sure that your site is easily navigable is with your third-party services. So you think about it, many of you probably use a volunteer platform or a donation platform. You want to ensure that the services you're using integrate really well with your site in a way that even looks like your site. So for example, when I was at the Community Foundation, we switched over our donor management service and our donation platform. We went from one to another. And one thing that we did when we were looking at which was the best to use was which one would integrate with our site in a way that it didn't look like it was taking someone away from our site to a totally different organization, because they don't know that totally different organization. People are on our site because they know us. So we wanted a donation platform that integrated with our site and looked like our site, and people knew that they were giving to the Community Foundation. And so after you ask yourself that question, are you getting the most out of your website? The next question maybe, is it time for a new website? And I'll let Dan take it over from there.
So this is thanks, Lee, and thanks for kind of going through that self-assessment piece and understanding. This is a hard question to answer. Is it time for a new website? It's very personal to each organization and the factors you have to consider. There might be two organizations on the call that have age-wise, content-wise, complexity-wise, functionality-wise analogous websites. And for different reasons, one might be ready to move forward with a website this fall, and one might be putting it in the budget for spring 2026. So everybody's in a different place. The keeping up with the Joneses factor impacts different organizations in different ways and at different intensities. But sometime in the next 3 to 4 years, you'll need a new website. Some of the factors you control, and some of the factors you don't control. So first, let's talk about some factors that, if Lee, you go to the next slide, thanks. Some of the factors that you control. Most sites are good for about 3 years. This can be extended. And I'll tell you truthfully, in this space, a lot of them are extended. because budget is the coin of the realm, and you're not, a lot of y'all are not in a space where commercial builder and my lead competitor just made a hot new website. It's beautiful, and now I got to do the same because I'm going to fall behind. Right? That competition impacts people in a different way. The life cycle of a website can be extended with good partnership, good upkeep, and good management. So there's, like I said, there's stuff that you can control, but there's stuff you want to consider. Is the website still telling your story? If you have a change of mission, vision, values, a change of functions, you bring new programs on, you lose programs. Modern websites, you can go in. I mean, heck, you or I could go into a Beam and Hinge website and, find, copy, paste, and drop the new text of a new mission on the website, save it, update it, and you've got a new mission on your website. But if the website was built properly in the first place, what's the rest of that website doing to underpin that mission? So if the organization changes, the website probably needs to more holistically change to adapt, because the mission is more than just the 30 words that's been pasted onto the website. Mission, vision, values, organizational direction, strategic initiatives, all that good stuff. So that's just important to consider. What you can end up with over time is something we call lovingly a Mr. Potato Head site. I used to have a Jeep Wrangler. I also like the Jeep Wrangler because you can keep hanging stuff on it. Give it a jack and give it a fire extinguisher and a tow rope, and then you pull this off, and all of a sudden it's a different thing. So you might have a site that's that was launched and it was beautiful in 2015, and it goes along in its original pure form for a couple of years. And then in 2017, things are going well. You bring on a couple team members, you add a few programs, 2020 hits, you have to lose a few members, you have to take down, you can't fully support those programs, but the remnants of those programs are still on the site. 2022 rolls around, you get a new CEO. CEO looks at the website and he or she says, why is it like this? And has people nudge a bunch of stuff around. Now it's 2024 and it's a mess. So some people might be having like PTSD from that narrative that I just wove, because that's common. I mean, heck, that's common in nonprofits, in law firms, in schools, in municipalities. I mean, that's just the story of time going by and things changing. And you'll know if that's true or not, but for you folks that maybe have bigger websites, because depending on who you are, some of y'all probably have websites that are pretty modest. And really, the major call to action is the donate page, and a lot of the services happen off the website. Some folks might have larger websites that are fulfilling multiple functions. Can you still find everything you need? Is it still logical? Those are questions to ask for yourself. And the other thing is visual and branding. Rule of thumb, if you're doing a new brand, you probably want to do a new website. And you also want to think about sequencing those operations. You don't want to do a new website and then do a new brand, because a website done properly is more than just, again, it's just like I said with the mission. Sure, you can take the logo in the top left corner and paste in the new one. The new brand's on the website. But if you're really holistically weaving your brand throughout your narrative, that's not a one and done. So kind of rule of thumb, again, this is stuff you oftentimes do control. If you're thinking new brand, if strategic or operational initiatives, the world around you is driving a new brand, sequence it and think, all right, can we afford the new website and the new brand? If you know the new brand isn't coming for 3 years for reasons, but the website's a hot mess structurally and operationally, there's bridging strategies. And that's a path we can go down that is not the focus of this, but there's things you can do to kind of mitigate if you're not in a perfect scenario where the mission, vision, value brand project is happening right now. That'll be finishing up in November, and in Q1 2024 we're going to do a web project, and by next April our digital footprint is exactly what it needs to be out there in the world. So that's kind of some stuff you do control. If you go to the next slide, there are things that you don't control. the internet's a dynamic place, and I'll probably say that 5 times during this session, and I apologize. But the internet moves around you. So the internet that existed when you launched your website in 2021 is not the one that happens today. And again, I talked about that fat part of the bell curve. This is one of those slides where there's some folks that I'm going to talk over, and there's some folks that are going to say, yeah, we're fully aware of that. But just to kind of orient you generally, software updates and outdated plugins. Be your website on a Squarespace, a Wix, a WordPress, a Drupal, a Stripe. I mean, there's HubSpot. Your website could literally be on HubSpot. It's going to change. There's updates that are going to come, and there's dependencies. Most websites have plugins of some sort: good ones, bad ones, necessary ones, irrelevant ones. A couple you might have heard of: Yoast, Gravity Forms, iTheme Security. Yoast is an SEO that a lot of folks like as a best practice plugin. It gets updated regularly, and if the underpinning, if the core content management system, CMS, sometimes that'll update. But if a plugin hasn't been updated, it might not. It might hold the CMS that needs to update, but it can't because it's going to break the plugin. But if you don't update the CMS, you've got a security hole that's not being plugged. So this is that world where there's dependencies and interrelated issues, and over time, you either need a professional to do some development fixes, and eventually you just have to reset that technical debt. Load speeds. Again, time goes by. Everybody remembers. Well, not everybody. Shoot, I'm closing in on 50. I remember my Windows 3.1 machine in the mid 90s, right? It was reasonably fast when I got that computer my freshman year of school. I had the same computer when I was a senior. The computer hadn't changed, but what I was trying to do with it had, and it was slower. The same is said for your websites. That dynamic has gotten worse, or I shouldn't say worse. The grading for it, as far as the internet and your users, has gotten harder as more and more traffic shifts towards mobile, because people aren't wired in on their great home Wi-Fi or plugged in with an Ethernet cable. A lot of times they're at the checkout at the Kroger, and it's in the spot of town where they got 2 bars. Right. So your ability to still feed your site in that dynamic. And I think it was, gosh, Lee, I think it was about a year ago that Google changed their default feed ranking to mobile first. Directly, does that have a direct impact if your user's on a desktop? No. Is that how Google is evaluating sites for SEO purposes? Yes. So even if your folks are predominantly coming to you on desktop, Google is considering the mobile load speed when they say this is a performance site that I'm going to uprank a little bit for SEO purposes. The last piece on that, on the plugins, actually I'll hold that and talk functionality and integrations. Lee talked about it a little bit with some of the functionality piece. When you launched your site, your donation platform might have been great for you. Your needs changed, your donation platform changed, your grant making integration, your application process, whatever is happening, you might have changed, or maybe there's a new best practice, or maybe there's a new organization that's disrupting the industry and people are moving towards it. You might, the need to change what you're doing with your website can drive you to need a new website. Sometimes things just, there's a better way to do things. Are you signing it? Go out, if you're doing a Habitat for Humanity and you need volunteers regularly, are you able to take them natively like Lee was talking about on the website, or do you need to kick it out? And for some things, I'm not opposed to kicking out to a third party function if they're best in class. People know what Eventbrite is, right? And most of y'all, probably all of y'all, don't have the resources to pay an organization to reinvent Eventbrite. So there's great power in all those integrations that are out there. So that's important. These three things can impact how people experience the website, and that circles back to what Lee was talking about. Is your site inspiring trust? At launch, it might have been. 3 to 5 years later, it might not be. Like I said, I only said it 11 times, so I'll say it a 12th time. The internet's a dynamic place. Where do you start? So this is this is where I'll try to kind of just orient you a little bit to the industry. This first slide in the where do you start? If you've decided it's time for a website. For some folks, when I was in the Army in courses, they weren't hard. And a lot of times the instructor would be at the front and they'd say a thing and then they'd bang their foot. That meant you're going to see this on the test because they weren't trying to fail. This slide, a lot of times for folks, is the best takeaway when we do decks like this for audiences. Just because if you're newish or just coming from a different place where you don't have a lot of experience of building out websites, you might not understand the industry as a whole. So I'm going to just run down these, and if anybody has any questions, we're going to leave plenty of time at the end of this hour to ask questions. Do it yourself. That's an option. It's a tough option. And do it yourself, it can mean different people for different organizations. What it really means is you don't have a professional partner. Okay, maybe you have a volunteer. That volunteer might be amazing, but I still put a volunteer typically in a do-it-yourself, because a volunteer could say, my day job called or my kids called. I don't have time to volunteer anymore. The two biggest tools that people use in the DIY space are Squarespace and Wix. They're great tools. They are, I'll have conversations occasionally in the nonprofit space, a lot of times in the profit space, where somebody finds our website and they call us. And I'm on the phone with somebody and he says, hey, I've got a van and I'm doing mobile car washes. He'll come to your driveway and do a beautiful job on your vehicle. He needs a website. That person is not in the Beam and Hinge budget space. That person probably doesn't even want to spend $7,000 on a freelancer. They need to go to Squarespace. They need to pick from an established theme. They need to type their words in, and they need to go out and kick butt in the real world doing their mission, and maybe graduate into 4 years from now, they got 15 mobile vans that are going around, and they are, taking names in Columbia, South Carolina. Then they might need to have a budget and a professional partner and use the website to kind of carry them on. So Squarespace it can be a great tool for that. Great if you're just starting out. An important thing to know, if you're on Squarespace, or if you're ever talking to somebody who's considering it, Squarespace, Wix, you don't own the website. You're renting the website. You can always pull your pictures out. You can always pull your words out, copy them and paste them, put them in a Word doc. But that is proprietary. They own it. They own the themes. They give you the themes for free. What you're really paying for is a little bit of a premium, a few bucks extra, but you're essentially paying for hosting and getting the website for free. Like I said, it can be the right answer. I've got a friend from high school that went on to art school and is a super talented designer. He has a Squarespace website. It's gorgeous. He's got a master's degree in design, right? So there are scenarios. You might have somebody on your team that can really do great for you in this space. But most folks, you're going to have people look at it and say, oh, there's a Squarespace website. Freelancer. This is going to be less expensive than bringing a firm on. What I'll say with a freelancer is there's a wild variability in talent and resulting problem. There are some amazing individuals out there doing amazing work. For most folks, the analogy I love is a buck knife versus a Swiss Army knife. It's rare to have a human that's a super coder, designer, writer, SEO expert, data analyst versus a team of specialists. So if you've got your arms wrapped around an amazing freelancer, congratulations, go with it. If it's working for your organization, there is an unpredictability. I had a friend actually came to me and was considering going with like a more full packaged website. Went with a freelancer. I knew the freelancer. Freelancer was very talented. About a month into the project, he got a job. W-2, regular paycheck. He apologized profusely. He's gone. Now we're doing the friend's website. So there's risk in that that community, but if you've got the right person, feel good about it. It can be the right answer. Formulaic firms. Remember the Model T? You could have any color as long as it's black. These are folks these are folks that are experts in an industry. Some example industries that have these kind of firms focus. There's firms that just do law firms. There's firms that do municipalities. There's firms that do schools. They know what they do well, and they crank out those sites. Again, a lot of times you can hit a lower price point. Sometimes it's a more holistic product, and the website is free. I mean, there's folks in the school and website space that they want to do the IT, they want to do the admissions, they've got it's more than a website, and the website just a piece of the pie. That's fine. It might be the right answer. The disadvantage is it's less custom. You're not going to have as robust a discovery phase. It's not going to be truly, it'll be pick your theme, pick your color, pick your blocks. Do you want a blog? Yes or no. Do you want this? Yes or no. So it can be faster, and there are pros and cons depending on your niche. And we're here supporting and part of the Together SC community. Nonprofit is too broad an umbrella. There's not a formulaic firm that just can come to the table and be like, I'm expert in this. Custom websites. The second to the last bullet, that's Beam and Hinge. This is where we live. Think robust discovery, think custom design, think a more personal site that's truly about your website. Your website is your website. People aren't going to confuse it with 6 other folks in your space that are using a similar WordPress or Squarespace template. And the one thing, and I'll mention it again on a later slide, but don't ever conflate custom design, custom website. Don't conflate custom with proprietary. Your website should be your website. You want to hear words like open source when you're having a conversation with a potential partner. You want to verify that they're not going to do anything that is locking you into their world. So if they partner with you for 2 years after the website's gone, and then you want to go a different way, and they're like, a shame, there'd be a shame if anything were to happen to that website there. And I'd say that's rarer in the industry broadly than it was as recently as 10 years ago. Because you look at what our world looked like 10, 15 years ago, there was web companies that were hosting their clients' websites on a Windows XP machine underneath the CEO's desk, and that's that era. We've largely moved past it, but you still want to make sure you own your website. But this is where we live. The difference between the custom design and the enterprise level custom design: size, complexity. Are you able to think the community foundation versus Blue Cross Blue Shield? Think a 10-partner law firm versus the Department of Motor Vehicles. Beam and Hinge actually exists because our sister company that predates us by 14 years grew in size, grew in complexity, got bigger clients, bigger needs, and all of a sudden they realized they were making beautiful websites that took 800 human hours, but could not efficiently make websites anymore that took 250 human hours. At the end of the day, that's the difference between these last 2 bullets. To get everything done, does the partner need to bring 2 people into a milestone meeting or 7 people into a milestone meeting? And folks, that again, this is me. I'm leading a 10-person organization now. When I was doing projects in the Army, it was just humans poured on. The amount of time that went into everything we did boggles my mind now that I see, how organizations like yours and ours need to run to be efficient and succeed. So I think that's it for this. Next slide. All right, preparing for the selection process. Here's some questions you want to ask that I'll kind of go into. This is the stuff that will impact. Let me just look at these. Really impact scope and complexity. Do you have somebody, either a volunteer or a full-time person, that can write the content for the website, or do you need your potential web partner to write content? Do you have content, but you need somebody that can make it more web friendly and they just need to curate the content? Do you have photography? The pictures that you have on your current website, they probably need to be replaced because you're buying a new website. But do you have good stuff of your mission? If you're Charleston Parks Conservancy, that's one of our nonprofit clients. Their wealth of beautiful, we caught them doing their project. We were like, don't miss all the flowers coming out in the spring. Get out in the world, get beautiful photography. I mean, you're selling parks. It's not that hard to sell parks. So is there a specific deadline to launch this site? The fast lane often costs more. If you want to cut in line, or if people are going to work on a Saturday, just be considerate and know your requirements. Think about this a little bit beforehand. There's what the site says, how it looks. There's also what it does. So we call these integrations, we call these complexities. Lee talked about them. I've mentioned a couple of them along the way. You have to have a calendar. Are there workflows that need to be considered where the calendar is fed by this human via Outlook and it feeds out to this? So just you're in your own scenario, but know that kind of having that laid out will help you have a better conversation. You don't want to get halfway through a project and be like, we forgot our grant making process. How does it start? And the answer might be, we've got a third party that does it. So we just need calls to action to logically bring people through our conversion funnel so they understand where they are and why they are now in a found on. It can happen and it's fine. So next slide. So selecting a partner, you want to understand what the product is that they're building. I think I mentioned already, WordPress, which is what we build in, it's about half the internet. It's the 800-pound gorilla on the internet. I'm going to use that kind of as an example of how to think about two very different processes. There are sites out there on the internet that are billed as custom design websites, but they have what's called a site builder. Things like WP Page Bakery, Elementor. There's a bunch. What those can do, those can be very empowering tools, but they because they don't really require a true developer. You just need to be an expert in Elementor. They take a lot of the stuff that people see on the front end of the website and they push that user interface into the CMS's control panel, and people, the actual user, not the developer, is toggling a bunch of knobs, changing colors, and doing things inside. So you're going to have less flexibility, and it'll be a less custom piece. Once the site is built, there's more overhead. You don't have a site that is the way we do ours, a clean front end, HTML, JavaScript, CSS, sitting on top of your content management system with well-vetted plugins that are appropriate. Like I said, I mentioned a few. Gravity Forms. I talked about Eventbrite as not a plugin, but just an integration. Folks don't want to pay a partner to reinvent a form engine. People can do it. It would take hundreds and hundreds of hours. So there's great plugins out there that are very empowering to organizations. But there's also a plugin to you got to show a table of data, and you want the table to look really, amazing. And you download a plugin to make your table look really amazing. Now you have a plugin that was made by Dan Stanton in his garage at night. I take a job, I go away, my plugin's no longer supported. WordPress or whatever goes a couple upgrades. A security hole is found in my plugin. It's on your website. It's not supported on the internet. And a lot of times, a plugin like that just makes a table look fancy for a developer. I see plugin because I can't code anymore, but a developer sees that's just 3 lines of HTML, and you don't need a plugin. And now you've got a more performance site, a site with fewer plugins, a site with a better security profile because it's one less door for somebody to walk in. And then you need to think about the relationship post-launch. So if you go next slide, and I'll go through these last few slides quickly, because to be honest, I forgot that we fleshed slide 13 out to have a slide for each of those questions. So I kind of just talked through most of the next 3 slides. But we talked about an open source CMS. Again, don't conflate open source with proprietary. WordPress is open source. Drupal is open source. Squarespace and Wix, they're proprietary. Site builders, I've talked an example. I've supported a nonprofit locally on a Saturday where I spent 3 hours and I got them a WordPress website up on the internet. Lee probably could have done the same. Our designers and developers at Beam and Hinge would have kicked us out of the office if they saw what we put on the internet. But it's very empowering because WordPress essentially has an app store as good as my phone. If there's a thing you want to do, you can just plug it in. So I don't want to talk down that sort of website as a solution, because there's ways to implement WordPress that you have something that actually resembles a Squarespace or a Wix, but it can be done with less external assistance. But if you start with a blank piece of paper and have a designer have a conversation with you to envision what you see wanting to happen, and then they go and they're in an Adobe product or a Figma or a Sketch, and they build what you described, and then they bring it back to you and you say, yes, make that a reality. That is not a page builder. That is then somebody that is an expert developer making that a reality in code. And the good news about that is, again, it's less to maintain, and your site 3 years later will be more performant. Next slide. Lee, you want to hit accessibility?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we think about accessibility, it is one of those things that, yes, you may do it for a smaller audience, but it helps everyone. It helps everyone's experience on your site. So one of the things that if you're engaging a company in, talking about building you a website, one thing that they definitely need to tell you is they're going to build their site to meet the latest web content accessibility guidelines. Right now, that's 2.2. 3.0 is on the way. It could be here in the next year or so. So that's one thing that they need to think about, that there are these guidelines that exist out there that will help your site if you rank high enough for it and meet those accessibility guidelines. They should also mention, maybe that they use alternative text when they are building the site. So you think about images on your site, or buttons and whatnot on the site as well. Sometimes you may have a user who comes on and they have a sight impairment. And so that alternative text is crucial to being on the back end, because they may use a screen reader that helps them navigate your site and get to where they need to be on the site. One of the what I almost call a hidden benefit of accessibility and making sure that your site is 100% accessible is it can also help with your SEO, your search engine optimization. So if you've got alternative text coded correctly on your site for images and whatnot on the back end, as Google crawls your site and it's looking for keywords that you use, if they're used in those photos, it's ranking you higher in SEO sometimes. So it's a little bit of a hidden benefit with SEO as well. But absolutely, there should be a conversation and should probably be led by the group you're looking at and working with into accessibility to make sure that everything on your site is accessible to everybody.
Post-launch, there's different scenarios. The phrase I use with our potential clients is, we don't believe in having someone be alone and unafraid on the internet the day after the new site is launched. But that is a thing. So sometimes you either got the in-house talent, you don't have the budget for an ongoing relationship, or you went with like I said, a freelance or a Squarespace type solution. New site goes up on the internet, and it's your baby. You own it. No help. So that's the case. And if the site goes down, you don't know if it's the registrar, the host, the theme on your WordPress or whatever. figure it out. So not my preference. It is a thing. There's a lot of people out there with websites that have no help. With help, there's different flavors of that. There are just kind of you have a person to call. You have no standing relationship. When you call, they do work, they bill you hours. That's a thing. There's also folks that have more of a holistic approach where you kind of talk about how much ongoing support you're going to need. That's what Beam and Hinge does. We have an ongoing relationship with all our clients, at least for the first year, just because if you're not happy with something 3 months after launch and we're not there, I don't want you to be mad at Beam and Hinge because, there's probably a reason that something changed, and we'll take care of that. But there's folks that need a little bit of support. They just not kind of need the essential services, keeping the site updated, secure, performant, SEO optimized, accessible. But you also might not have a designer in-house, and you've got an older donation base, and you need somebody to take your content and lay out a beautiful print newsletter 4 times a year. Because I know we know this business. If somebody wants to write a check on paper and mail it to you in an envelope, you're going to take the check. So, I know that everybody's just not mashing the donate button. So, but having that kind of that ongoing, and there's flavors in the middle there. That it is not a no support, pay as you go. There's some folks that have managed service agreements where they're going to make sure the website stays up, and they're going to do a very specific list of things for a set fee. And then anything above that is hourly. So it's kind of like a hybrid of pay hourly and just having a holistic service. Different folks need different things. Like I said, some people have an in-house IT person, and we love the Venn diagram of I know the Venn diagram of websites and managed IT has a little bit of overlap, but there's some organizations that feel like those 2 circles are on top of each other. And most IT guys or gals don't love when they own the website, because the website is more so for operations and marketing. And the IT person just wants to make sure you're not opening a phishing email in your Outlook. So that's that. And I promised some time, so we've got a few minutes left. We've got about 7 minutes left for any questions. Like I said, general questions be great. If anybody has anything that's been bugging them and might not be great for the full audience, I can stay for a few minutes after. Lee can, or we can schedule something else.
All right, feel free to raise your hand or put your question in the chat. I've got one from Mary. We kind of covered a little bit of this earlier, but could you explain how you evaluate website accessibility to ensure AA standards are greater? How do you handle these discussions with your clients? Do you ensure your clients' sites will meet the regulatory standards that are enforced recently via the June final rule?
Okay, that's a good one. Lee, do you want me to field that one, or? So the 2 areas, like I said, the internet's a dynamic place. SEO and accessibility are the 2 biggest areas. SEO best practices and accessibility standards move. They both have, and I know the question's about accessibility, but I'm kind of just jointly talking about these 2 because they're kind of siblings, because they wrap around the words that you're using on your website and the underpinnings, internet ability to understand it. They both have, and gosh, the tool we're using now escapes me. There's 2 parts to website to checking for website accessibility. First, you can do it programmatically. Something as simple as the Lighthouse tool, that's a Google tool, that gives you a score across the board. Performance, SEO, accessibility, best practices. If you've got, and it gives you that score for both desktop and mobile. If you click into that score, it'll tell you your issues that you can address. Then there's also, take one step deeper, and you can do an automated tool that does a programmatic but automatic deeper dive into all the pages on your website, and it'll give you issues. Stuff like, this image has no alt text. Well, there's no alt text. A blind user isn't going to be able to say, well, what's the image of? If you're not structured properly with your heading, H1, H2 down the line for the screen reader to properly understand content versus heading. And all of a sudden you're reading through content, but it gets to a break and it gives you the heading again. And then the next level after that is humans going through and scrubbing the website, because there's, I mean, heck, we're in the business, and I get automated emails, people trying to sell me accessibility or SEO services because they scanned my site. Well, I have humans look at my site. So, there's for everybody that says this is the way to go, there's going to be somebody that comes along with a programmatic tool and says, this is a disaster. But really the answer to how do you check, it's a combination of some high level automatic tools and then having people go in and look at the site, open it on their iPhone, press it.
Dan, this is Mary Alex, the one who asked the question.
Okay.
The reason I asked, I do accessibility with Able South Carolina. We're a disability-led organization that we offer the service to review sites. We have screen reader users who do that. I just wanted to make sure that we touched on the importance of that for folks, because especially when you were reflecting on using freelance folks who may be really talented, this could be a place where there's a very large gap. And unfortunately, you're legally liable if you end up producing a site that is less than the standard. But thank you for reflecting on the importance of having humans check, because for those of us who are in this field, we know that a scan can produce false positives. So I really appreciate the thoroughness of your answer. Thank you guys so much for reflecting.
You're very welcome. And the one other piece that we've spent the last 4 months with our clients going through is how deep down the rabbit hole do you go, and how deep can you afford to go? Because you might have a big site. Municipalities have big sites just because there's lots.
Yes.
With hundreds of PDFs. You might have accessible, properly built code for the website, but you might have a PDF that's not properly OCR'd, optical character recognition. So it's on there. And for some folks, there's so much on the internet, so much of it's not accessible. So there's not a magic bullet to spend. You just work on it, and you just kind of keep rowing.
Amen. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. I really appreciate that.
You're welcome.
That was a great question. Joanne asked, what about the question, do we still need a website? If so, can we keep it simple and put more active items on social platforms? I feel like blogs and email sign up are dead.
Oh my gosh. Did I write that question? Was that like a
That was Joanne.
So, Joanne, I'll buy you a cup of coffee for asking that. You need a website. Yes. Do I sell websites? Yes. Do you need a website? Yes. Does it have to be, can it be simple? Sure. Occasionally there's a reason to have a social feed on your website and aim people to your Instagram. But we've some for-profit folks that we talk to and some nonprofit folks that talk to that build their organization on Facebook or build it in Instagram. You are at the whims of the legislation coming out of DC, the EU, corporate policy coming out of California. You are not operating in your living room. You are operating in somebody else's living room with that. Social media is super empowering. The canonical location for your content. There are outliers. I'm going to say, I'm aiming at the fat part of the bell curve here. The canonical location for your content, your news, your updates, your blog, your events, that needs to be on your website. That's the anchor, properly tagged for SEO. And then you take that content and you drop a post on LinkedIn with a sentence teaser and a link to the content, because that puts people at your content. Content adjacent is the volunteer button. Content adjacent is the donate button. Content, they're now in your living room looking at your calls to action. And you can take that same content that you've written once and you can put it in your MailChimp that you're sending out quarterly and sending it back. So you want to own. It's just like I said with Squarespace. it's very empowering, but you're operating in somebody else's living room, not your own. So what does that mean? Like Lee said, there are organizations that have very robust services that kind of bridge the divide between organizational operations and kind of front end web services. Like Foundant's a big one. We've mentioned it. Blackbaud. There's LMSs in the education space. So you might scale back and have a lesser website on the front end that's more of a digital billboard, and then your click, for all the right reasons, takes you someplace else. But you need to have one. Sometimes it's just a credibility check, depending on who you are. You sent an email. We've all hopefully graduated from, we're not sending an email that is nameoforganization@gmail.com. You want to send an email that is name of function or name of human at organizationname.org or whatever, .net.com. And then what people do, what I do, is I go just copy that out and I see that the website matches. You know, I was dealing with somebody the other day that the domain on their email was something and the domain on their website was something else. And just it just the little alarm bells. Is this a scam? I mean, like I said, we build websites. The internet's a dynamic place. It's also really like a bad neighborhood. Like it's just getting yucky out there in some ways. So some people are thankfully getting better at being aware of that. So you just need to realize that there's folks that are operating in a skeptical environment. So yes, have a website. I owe you a cup of coffee, John.
All right.
Yeah, if it's okay, I'll give a quick anecdote on that. You know, my dad has been in the automotive repair business for going on 40 years now. Never had a website. Never needed a website in his mind, and has always had a Facebook page. And just a couple of weeks ago, called me and said, you know, hey, turns out I need a website, because just like Dan was saying on the credibility, he's done 2 applications to service a fleet of vehicles for companies, and they want to look at his website and see about his company. And when we think about nonprofits, especially though, you know, you think about your revenue. Some of it, yes, it's coming from donors who are going on your site and giving, or maybe they're writing you a check. A lot of folks, though, or a lot of nonprofits annually rely on grants. And so as you go to apply for a grant through a grant making institution, oftentimes that grant review board is going to go to your website to learn more about you, and maybe look up your board composition or your staff composition for different areas. So it's important.
And I've got one last just thing to mention to consider on social. Do your best to, like I said, leverage social, but have the flow of traffic going towards your website. Beam and Hinge is 10 people. I don't know how big your different organizations are, but you've heard of the attention economy. And if you pit us against the social media platforms, we'll lose. You want somebody to donate, but if they're looking at your request to do a thing on Facebook or on YouTube, they want that next video to be them looking at a review of the new F-150 Lightning and not mashing your donate button. So they've got behavioral scientists and PhDs in psychology, folks that are spending all day, every day, getting them to engage with the platform and not with your need, your desire for them to engage with your service or to volunteer or to donate. So use the heck out of social, but just be wary.
All right, last question from Ben. You need to have a way to receive online donations that you control. Oh, this wasn't a question, I guess it was a statement, but we can go into
all of my stuff for statements. You can
Facebook
skip me.
donations. Yeah. So I mean, just we could talk about that for a second if we want to, but I know we need to wrap up. I'm sure there's any other ones.
I will. There's one thing I'll say on that, because there's the don't need any help from developer way, and then there's the kind of built it in more organically way. Lee talked about it. Keeping them on your domain to do the thing is great, but if you don't have the ability to do that right now, it is more friction. You might get it, it's an extra click or two, so some people could bounce off. But whereas Square, Stripe, PayPal, people know those names. So you're in a fairly, it's not the ideal way, but if your donate button kicks people to PayPal.com, and it's the PayPal.com donate to donate to Sister Care page, and theirs doesn't do it this way because we wouldn't build it that way. But there, as long as you're not, because that's better than trying to convince people to put their credit card number into a hanky form on a website that doesn't say HTTPS and it's saying warning, 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 not secure. So it's good. But yes, have a donate button. That's important.
All right, I think that's the end of our questions.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Dan and Lee. We really appreciate this webinar today. Is recorded, so we're going to send it out to everyone, and everyone's going to get a survey afterwards. And we will share this presentation as well.
Thanks, y'all. We're glad to do it.
Thank you all. Bye.